and we had everything agreed, and then COVID hit and my job offer was rescinded, as you do in 2022, 2023. We met online.
You're leaps ahead of many other law firms.
I said, if you do this, you just have to be really careful because it will impact your personal life.
I imagine that would have been quite stressful.
I naively thought it was going to be easy.
Welcome to File Notes. I'm your host, Sophie Svensson, and in today's episode, we're joined by Angus Grayson, founder of HouseMe Legal. Angus shares the strategic decisions and principles that led him to establish his own practice for the next generation of homeowners, offering a unique perspective at the dynamic crossroads of law and business. Tune in to discover his innovative approach, perfectly attuned to the evolving attitudes of millennials. Our deep dive explores launching your own practice, identifying niche markets, mastering technological integration, and the pivotal role of mentorship in an environment that demands both entrepreneurial and legal skills. No more delays, let's dive into this episode of File Notes. So thanks so much for joining me, Angus. I'm really excited about what we're going to unpack today. You only left university 10 years ago, but now you've already started your own legal practice, HouseMe Legal. Can you take me through the events that led you to taking the plunge and deciding to start your own practice?
Sure. Probably the best place to start was, like yourself, I did an exchange at the end of my university. When I came back, I naively thought it was going to be easy to get a law graduate job. Turns out it was not. I think at the time I remember reading that in NZ we have one of the highest output of law graduates per capita for the amount of jobs available. So my first year back was basically just hustling to get a grad job. I eventually found one working for a sole practitioner in Parnell. I worked there for just under a year and then I moved across to a bigger firm in town. I was at a bigger firm in town for approximately just under 6 years, mainly doing commercial property, subdivisions, all sorts of work, mergers and acquisitions. And then about 2 weeks before COVID, I had planned to move across to another firm, smaller firm, a boss I was more aligned with his values. He was a named partner, very extroverted, out there winning business. And so I wanted a change. And we had everything agreed. And then COVID hit. And my job offer was rescinded until COVID basically went away. Again, I naively thought that COVID was just going to be like the Zika virus or monkeypox or any of the global viruses that didn't last for that long. But yeah, I overestimated that one, and suddenly I was stuck where I was. I described it as I was just a piece of plankton floating around in the commercial property ocean, just going where the tide would take me. Then about 5 or 6 months after that, so from March through to August, September, the Reserve Bank dropped its rates, which then caused all the other major banks to drop their interest rates. This had a flow-on effect of suddenly I had lots of friends calling me going, hey, can you help us buy property? And it was a two-part answer. Yes, I can, but the firm I work for isn't actually interested in doing this. They mainly focus on sellers and larger clients, and their interest was not aligned with helping first-home buyers. And so I had to refer away a lot of work. Most of my work I referred away would either go to a friend of a friend or their parents' lawyer or their parents' friend's lawyer. And I kept hearing the same feedback. They got an estimate. The estimate blew out. They didn't learn anything. They were often getting asked for documents at the last minute. There was no transparency. And it was just a very poor service and experience. And so they didn't really feel that valued as a client because of who they were and their buying power. So the more I heard this, I thought I actually want to do this myself. And so I created a plan to figure out how to actually do this. In the legal world, most people just often move across firms or join a pre-existing partnership. So there was quite a bit of research to figure out how to create a startup law firm. Once I had a plan, I then just worked backwards how long it was going to take me. So you have to do 2 courses. One is called Stepping Up, which anyone in New Zealand, if they're a lawyer, if you want to be a director or a partner somewhere, you have to do this course. It's about 12 weeks and then 3 on-site days. The other one is the trust accounting course. So to be able to manage clients' funds, this takes about 3 months worth of study as well. And then you do like an exam day. So after you do all that, then you apply to the Law Society, you have an interview with them, you have to get references and then get a final tick off. And by the time that arrived for me, that was around about March 2002. A month later, I got married. And so we had our honeymoon doing a tiki tour around NZ because this was like still prime COVID time. And then by the time that finished, it was about the 1st of June. So I've been practicing in business from June last year. And again, I probably couldn't have got my timing worse with how tumultuous and up and down the property market has been in the last 18 months. So it has been an interesting ride.
I love the fact that one of your unique selling propositions of HouseMe Legal is that you recognise that people want to learn this process. At the end of the day, people want to know that they're getting their money's worth when they're paying a large amount of money for a service.
It's good you mentioned education because HouseMe Legal's 4 pillars. Our values are service, integrity, transparency, education. I needed a word I could remember, sight, so I could talk about it freely and actually live up to the values instead of them just being words on the wall, which perhaps a few companies are guilty of in 2023.
So, with that in mind, me being someone in your target market, a millennial wanting to buy my first property, and say I've stopped buying avocado on toast and stopped buying coffees and I'm ready to buy my first home, would you be able to take me through the process of how it would be different if I were to come to HouseMe Legal than if I were to go to a traditional law firm to buy my first property?
Sure. Whereabouts would you like to buy, Sophie?
I'm thinking of buying in Auckland, hopefully.
Yeah. What do you think? Just an entry level property in Herne Bay or Ponsonby?
I'd love an entry level property in Herne Bay.
I'm not sure if I can actually, if we can bring it up on the screen, but I can run you through the process which I normally go through. So what I like to do is
Sure.
I've created like a landing page, which I send to people, brokers or also people who inquire. And on the landing page, it basically just has, instead of having to sift through my website, it just has the 5 things I often find that people want to do. 1, book a call. I've got my first home buyer cheat sheet on there. How to withdraw your KiwiSaver, how to get ready to make an offer and go to auction, and then the 4-stage buying checklist. And then once they book a call, it's done through Calendly, and Calendly is like an auto meeting booker. It's really useful, so I can just set aside certain hours of my day so that I can do deep work during certain times and also have plenty of slots available for meetings. I found it's really important that one of the most important parts is just being able to pick up the call and schedule time in with someone on the day. Often people are reasonably understanding, and if you can do that within 1 to 3 hours, they're generally quite happy. So Sophie, we're going to buy your first home in Herne Bay, Auckland. So I'll take you through. So welcome to HouseMe Legal's 5-stage buying process, otherwise known as Buy It. So B stands for book a call. And congratulations, you are 20% of the way there to buying your first home. U stands for understand the money. And without the money, there's no lovely little bungalow for you in Herne Bay. Now, I can see that you're working with a mortgage broker, so I'm going to trust that they are reasonably competent enough to do their job and they will sort out your loan and funding for you. The next step stands for Y. That stands for you and the do it yourself. You're probably around about this stage where the only thing this costs you at this stage is your time. So you're on homes.co.nz, Trade Me, researching whether you're eligible for a first home grant, KiwiSaver, looking around the local community. The next step where you probably are at now is I. I stands for involve the professionals. This is where you actually have to start paying money to know that what you're buying is actually what you're going to get. For instance, As your lawyer, I act as the project manager and talk to everyone. I talk to yourself, your mortgage broker, the seller's lawyer, the building inspector, anyone else involved in this transaction. T, the final step in buy it, is for timing. This is the amount of time you need to get ready to make your offer, get pre-approval, have anything else sorted, the amount of time you need to satisfy any conditions, and the amount of time you need from being able to move out of where you're renting into your new home. Now, I think we can focus on the I and T stage, which is actually making an offer. Now, when it comes to making an offer, it's a bit like running a race. Now, you can start paying for your conditions in advance, like a building report, a limb report, and a legal review, and making your offer more narrow. And you can get a head start down the racetrack, so getting down some further hurdles. However, if you don't have the right price, seller's not going to accept your offer. So it can get quite disheartening if you spend all these costs to make your offer and you're not getting accepted. You don't even get your foot in the door to do a conditional review. So with someone like yourself, I often recommend putting in a due diligence offer. A due diligence offer is a very wide clause that allows you to agree the price and key dates first, and then also do your homework after you've agreed the price. So that means that you don't actually have to spend any money until you've agreed the key terms with the other side. How does that sound?
That sounds great. I really love the racehorse analogy of getting further down the track.
And one bonus as well with working with HouseMe Legal is that we understand it's a competitive market. Not many of my clients are successful with their first offer. So if you miss out at auction, can't satisfy your conditions, we'll cap our fee at $600 plus GST and disbursements. Even if the time has exceeded that on the file, this just gives you some certainty that you're not going to end up paying for a full legal bill unless you actually get to move in. So I found that benefit's been really useful as well to people to go, okay, we're actually going to go all in, like playing poker, push your chips in and go, we're all in. If you're unsuccessful, then, at least you've got a cap fee. And I consider it's a long-term journey for me to work with some clients. And I'm slightly different too. I don't charge per 6 minutes. So per email, per call. So often people will be checking in with me about how they're going, and the matter clock isn't on until I actually have to do the legal review.
On that topic, why do you think that it's more common practice for law firms to be operating on a 6-minute billable hour basis rather than transparent fixed fees? And do you think that in the future we'll see more law firms offering transparent fixed fees in the future?
The million dollar question. If you can look around at most law firms, law is one of the oldest professions, right? And when you do have a look at how most of their lifestyles appear to be, they seem to be doing rather well. So why would you change? Why would they want to change something that's broken, right? Most of the time you work your butt off for 10 years. You then move into partnership. You get laden with all this debt. You then have to buy your way into the partnership until you're a full equity partner. So often you don't actually start making any real money until your late 40s, early 50s. And so this process has been set up that there's the golden carrot at the end of large billing numbers. And because of the system, often people don't want it to change, right? But it's more, perhaps the industry needs to look at itself in the mirror and go, is this client focused, or is this helping ourselves? So I think as well with the next generation of clients and people coming through, we want transparency, right? And so people are used
Definitely.
to getting fixed fees, and I appreciate there'll be a lot of people on here going, I can't give fixed fees for my job because I don't know what's going to happen, and these are the litigators out here, and that's fine, we'll push them to a side. But I've been fortunate that because I focus on 90% of my clients are first home buyers in Auckland, I can get very transparent and work out what they actually want, and that allows me to create fixed fees because I know roughly what their journey is going to be. There might be a couple of detours here and there, and we can, on the initial call, I'll find out if you need your KiwiSaver out, first home grant out, are you buying a cross lease, a unit title, are you borrowing any money from your parents? And we can just factor that into the fixed fee. After our call, I can give you a quote down to 2 decimal places. I'll go through with them on the pricing schedule how it works. And I've found often people are happy to pay once they know what they're actually in for. But to answer the second part of your question, I think there will be a bit of a revolution in New Zealand with fixed fee. There's a big movement in Australia called value pricing, which I think we'll see more of here in the next decade or so.
Interesting. What's value pricing?
It's more, again, I'm not an expert with it, but it's more just figuring out what the client wants. For instance, that's me pricing to get you into your first home and telling you, hey,
Yeah.
it's like we went through with buy it. This is the process. I'm going to hold your hand along the way and I'm going to get you into your home. It's not, I've got all this paperwork to do, all these emails to send. It's, I'm going to work with you to get you your dream result.
I really love the innovative approach that you've taken to developing your practice. And I think it's fair to say that you're leaps ahead of many other law firms who still perhaps use fax machines and still have the same processes that they've always had because they've always worked. I'd love to understand what types of technology have been key in developing your practice and what's been your decision-making process in selecting technology to use.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Like the Law Society only abolished using checks in the last 12 months, maybe slightly longer, 18 months. So that was still considered a legitimate form of payment until recently. Uh, Using technology, yeah, for me, that's one of the most important things. Again, you have to tinker around a bit just to figure out what works for you. But a lot of admin and database jobs can be synchronized through using technology. Even if it's on my Calendly call, they get to book in, they get answer 5 key questions. This data then gets put into the CRM and the spreadsheet. And on the call, I can see who they are, what's their email address, cell phone number, are they ready to buy, and what they actually need ahead of the call. After the call, I'll get them to fill out the client info form, which I know a lot of firms still do manually, print it out, handwrite it, or fill in the Word doc. Then an admin staff has to move that data over manually. There's room for errors. It's unnecessary time. The client will often, on the Google form, answer all the information I need, take them from where they are now through to settlement. So at settlement, I don't have to ask them what their IID number is. I already hold it. They've already uploaded their passport, their proof of address. They have to let me know, do they need their KiwiSaver to pay the deposit? Because often that's a really time crucial element. And so I already have all this information either before we get on the first call or after the first call, and it just makes such a big difference. Then all of this flows across to the rest of the business, and I'm not hung up trying to track down where the right data and information is.
Today's episode is sponsored by VXT, the phone system built for law firms. VXT integrates with practice management systems so that when lawyers make calls, their billable time and legal advice can be saved in the right place automatically. 20% of billable time goes unrecorded. A lot of that is phone calls that get forgotten about. Get some of those billables back using VXT. Go to vxt.co.nz or click the link in the description to find out more.
Yeah, so it seems like having to have started your own firm, you've had to do every role and learn every role from secretary to trust accountant. And have you enjoyed being in the details of all of those roles? And do you think that has been a big impact on learning how to create efficient ways of doing things rather than sticking to the standard paper-based form or non-cloud-based technologies?
Yes, and so it's one of those things you have to dive off the 10-meter board to be able to learn to dive, to actually do it right, because if you're trying to integrate all this change at a pre-existing firm, they're not going to like it. And so it's very hard to actually bring that through, especially when you're going to hear people say, that is not how we've done it. We've always done it like this and it's worked fine. So yeah, at my old job, like in a sporting analogy, I used to just play 1 or 2 positions in the rugby team. I was probably playing 12 or 13, just passing the ball along whenever it came to my job. And now I've had to learn from secretary up to partner and back, plus the trust accounting side. And yeah, you really have to throw yourself in the deep end to actually understand all the aspects of it, and plus then be able to be confident enough to tinker with it and try out what's actually new and available in the market.
And where have you had this business side to you? Did you have an interest in this when you were at university, or what led you to having that business mindset?
I don't think I really had a business mindset at university, or it didn't happen for quite a while. There'd probably be a couple of factors that lead me to want to do this. Probably the number one, the longer you stay in a job in your career, you probably get a bit cynical about being told what to do. And so if you can't influence the business or actually make a change or impact, you perhaps naively want to think that you can do it yourself. The second one was, I think I was comfortable with, from like during my 20s, I like to organize stuff, whether it was cold starts, red cards, flat events, golf trips, etc. Not too dissimilar actually from running a business. You need to know, is there demand for people to go and engage in these services? Can I create a budget? Can I under promise and over deliver? All these skill sets actually flow over to running your own business. So all you have to do is say what you're going to do it and deliver it on time within the budget. And that's the same as organizing any flat event or anything you do with your mates. So I found those skills have actually been really transferable across to running a business.
Yeah, it's definitely a good reminder for when you're at university and if you're getting involved in clubs or even organising a red card for your flat, they actually all do pay off in the skills you learn and to what you'll be able to apply it to later on in life. I imagine that there aren't that many lawyers who envision themselves starting their own practice like you have. And on one hand, I think this is because lawyers are very risk adverse. And on the other hand, I think it's because it's a very daunting process that seems very difficult to achieve. You have no idea where to start. Could you take us through the step-by-step process that you went through when starting your practice?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think you've summed it up quite well there. Lawyers are naturally risk adverse creatures, so they would rather hang out with in an environment they actually know, or they'll move across to one that looks similar in order to get promoted and become a partner. When I originally had this idea, first thing I did was try to reach out to other lawyers who I knew who were directors or partners somewhere else. And again, it was actually really difficult because most of them who had gone out on their own was often 10 to 20 years ago. And the rules to do this back then were, let's just say, a bit looser, and there wasn't as much study or prerequisites to do. And then because often these people were very busy, it was very difficult to actually get more than a 15-minute conversation from them. And often they didn't have anything written down. It was just all up here or some vague and distant memory. And me being someone who likes process, I like to keep track of how things are going. I had this old project management table from one of the subdivisions I used to run. And so I just converted that into project management table for what I thought I needed to do, or what I knew I needed to do to go from being an employee to being an employer, or becoming promoting myself basically to director. And so I just created a list of tasks when I thought they were new by, their costs, who the key contact person was, and I kept track of that. After I finished this process, it took me a long time to figure it out because I was navigating it in the dark, and you'd often find out about new tasks when you actually had to confront them. So reflecting on this, I thought, I'm not the only person who's going to have to do this. And so I tidied up my project management table, and I've created now a roadmap. So reverse chronological order. If you want to set up your own law firm, I've got a full list of tasks that I did. It goes from 12 months down to 0. So if you've done these courses with NZLS, then you could probably do it in less than 3 months if you were very driven. If you had to do the full start from 0, go to 100, I've got all the steps, including how to sign up for NZLS, how to sign up for the trust account course. I often promote this about twice a month on LinkedIn, saying, hey, this is how I went about it. I had no idea how to do this. These are the 4 or 5 stages and how you can break them down. By the way, if you would like a copy, please DM me. I've had about 10 people probably DM me and ask for the roadmap and use it to help create their own practice. And so I give that away for free. I'm a big believer in providing freemium and growing my brand that way. If anyone here is listening and would like to take on trying to start their own law firm, please send me a message and I'll send you a copy. You can get back to me with any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, I've taken a look at this document and you're definitely a very type A detailed person. It looks like it would be very helpful if I was in the position of wanting to start my own practice.
Yeah, thanks. So even some of the tasks in there, which other lawyers might not know about that are on the list, are even how to run a social media account, how to schedule posts. Often these technologies only cost you $5 to $10 a month, but they're super useful once you get the hang of them. You don't have to constantly context switch, and you can use them to batch all your work and do it in one go.
Yeah, so you mentioned at the start of the episode that one of the reasons you started HouseMe was because you had friends or friends of friends who were wanting to buy a house, but you couldn't help them. And so when you first started HouseMe Legal, I assume that a lot of your business was word of mouth. And is this still the case, or what are your other main avenues of finding work?
That's a good question. I remember on the interview I had with one of the senior practitioners on the Law Society, he said, don't do any work with family and friends. And I thought about that a lot. And when it comes down to doing work for friends, like it's the obvious place to start. And I think you'll only run into trouble with doing work with your friends if you just don't deliver what you say you're going to do and you overcharge them. Otherwise, in my view, it's one of the most rewarding experiences. So that's, in my view, one of the worst pieces of advice I've had, and I've tried to actually utilize that as a strength. So at the start, I was mainly getting word of mouth referrals, which is how 90% of most business in New Zealand actually gets done. And now, at that time, I was trying to focus a lot of my content and outreach to finding first-time buyers. But I realized through my first 18 months of being in practice, the first-time buyer's journey does not begin with the lawyer. It always begins with the mortgage broker, at least the majority of the time. So I've been trying to create more content for mortgage brokers. One, are first in the sales cycle. Two, they have to do these transactions over and over again. And so that's been a unique focus for me in particular in the last 3 months.
Yeah. How important do you think it is of having a personal brand on the likes of LinkedIn in terms of trying to get more clients?
Yeah, it's really important. Like for me, LinkedIn in New Zealand for lawyers is generally more of a feeding ground for recruiters and unhappy lawyers. You're getting approached by people in your DMs. Hey, are you interested in this role? Or do you know someone who is? We can give you a Brizzy card. But LinkedIn, I found, is a very powerful outreach. It's free, which is the best thing, and it forces you to create content. And I've deliberately not named my law firm Grayson Associates or Grayson Partners or Grayson and Co. because I want it to be more, sure, I'm the key driving force, but my brand is about HouseMe Legal. And so I need to focus on what is HouseMe Legal. So as we talked about earlier, that's service, integrity, transparency, and education. And I've found that forcing yourself to post on these platforms. So the main ones I use are LinkedIn and also Instagram is really powerful for creating a brand. They're both free, and you can use simple tools like Buffer and Planoly to schedule your posts. Just try to stick to a content strategy.
Awesome. Now, I want to take a few steps back to just before you started HouseMe Legal and ask, were you scared?
I definitely felt like I was at the bottom of the mountain and I was looking up going, okay, I've got quite a bit to chew off here. It's not easy to walk away from when you're getting paid a 6K figure. You've become accustomed to the lifestyle. You're used to doing your role, enjoying life, and having set hours, free time in the weekends, etc. And yeah, it was daunting.
I imagine when the interest rates went from 3% to 8%, as a startup focusing on first home buyers, I imagine that would have been quite stressful. How did you navigate that period?
Yeah, because I work with such a select group of clients who Auckland-based first-home buyers, often dual income earners living a fast and busy life. 7 to 9 months ago, during that period, was when HouseMe Legal was at its absolute quietest. This is when people believe that, oh, we don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. Could they keep going up above 8? And so things were like, you can see a couple of tumbleweeds going across my desk a few days. However, I just had to back myself that my business plan worked, that New Zealanders are continuously obsessed with buying property. The demand isn't going to change over the long term. Our demographic of millennials still want the same thing. They want to buy their first home, have someone do it within a fixed fee, deliver on time, and hold their handle on the way. And so I just had to trust myself that this was going to come back. And then the last 6 months, I've had each month has gone bigger and bigger with the same client pool. And so it was just important for me to, I know this is thrown around a lot, but just to trust the process and that the demand was always going to be there.
That's good you hung in there, and it's very exciting to now be able to see the growth compounding each month and month. So when you were at a large law firm, there's always someone you can go to if you need help. Now that you have your own practice, what do you do when you don't know what to do, or who do you talk to?
That is a really good question, and I think that's what stops a lot of people from stepping out and wanting to go do this. I think one of the biggest myths with modern day business or trying to do your own startup is that you have to have a mentor. The only I would say to this is all you actually need is a mirror and an internet connection, and you can actually learn and mentor yourself. There's so much free information available online. It's just for you to actually track down and find it. And it was difficult for me because I thought I need a mentor, but on the Venn diagram, on one side I need someone with really strong legal skills, and I need someone who's very entrepreneurial. And with the crossover in those two categories, there aren't actually a lot of people, funnily enough. And there are lots of people with the legal brains, but not a lot of people with the entrepreneurial drive. And so for me, I realized that, okay, I can definitely drive the business side of things myself and learn from other entrepreneurial business owners. There's some crossover. And then I have a couple of mentors who I reach out to for different things. One of them I knew from university. He stayed at one firm during his career, now is a partner at a Queenstown office. So it's really useful to talk to him. Previously, my experience was in commercial property, and now I've moved into the residential space and at the opposite end of the food chain. So I go to him for a few questions because he's got a lot wider understanding of the area of law. I also have a mentor as well who, as you do in 2022, 2023, we met online. I approached him on Mentor Loop. I saw that he was on there. I'd actually been on his website. It's like a competitor in Wellington. I used it to help try and figure out what I needed to do to create my brand and services I was offering. I reached out to him, told him my story about what I was trying to do. He then DM'd me back in the next hour and said, I'll call you at 7 o'clock tonight. And so he gave me a call, explained to me the process of what he had done to create like a subsidiary that was specializing in residential property at his firm. He gave me half an hour of his time, and I was very grateful. And I was trying to wrap up the call. And at the end, he said, hey, can I actually keep the call going and talk to you a bit longer? I said, sure, that would be really great. And he said, hey, he basically just talked to me for another half an hour and said, if you do this, you just have to be really careful because it will impact your personal life and your personal relationships. You need to have really clear boundaries and just the impact that this could take on you. I go to him as well for other legal and non-legal questions. And so he's been a really important pillar for me. And I'm also just very conscious as well. I think in the legal industry, everyone thinks you have to know everything. And there's always going to be someone with 30 to 40 years more experience than you. It's not like digital marketing where you can actually become an expert quite quickly because it didn't exist a short time ago. Throughout history, someone in law will always have more experience than you. What I have realized is if you do know a small area of law and you just focus on niching down and delivering to that client over and over again, you can do that and run a successful business. A lot of my competitors are general practice, which they do a jack of all trades. They do lots of different things. For them, it's okay, it pays the bills, but it's also very hard to grow your brand. And I've enjoyed actually saying to people, hey, I specialize in first home buyers. They often give me this look like, oh, specialize in first home buyers? That's so annoying. And they ask so many questions. But it's been really powerful for me to actually grow my brand that way and say, this is who I'm aligned with, and this is who I help serve. It also helps me with my processes because uh, I know what the first time buyer wants. And so that means I can keep reiterating the process over and over again to make the experience smoother.
And so, the advice you had from your mentor about how starting a practice will impact your personal life, have you put in place any firm steps to have personal boundaries to manage this?
That's a good question that always evolves. I think the first key step for me is definitely on a Sunday, I need to plan out my week and look in advance. So not turning up to my desk and going, oh, what's on the menu today? Actually sitting down on a Sunday and also involving my wife. It's super important and going, these are my meetings. These are my key working hours. This is when I'm going to look after our daughter, Maddie. So I'm very lucky that I run my own business. I can do that during the day. Once I've allocated all that time and talked about what we have on in the evenings and also in the weekends, the weeks flow relatively smoothly. And so that's been a really important boundary for me. I often start work now super early in the morning, just so I can help with Maddie during the day. It also means I can get ahead before people start contacting you around about 9 a.m. Then it's been useful for me too. The latest call I'll take in the evening is 6:30, 6:45, 7 p.m. on Calendly. And after that, my phone is no notifications. I switch off. I've found that you can't fix any problem at night. It'll just ruin your sleep. But if you address it in the morning, you see the email, oh, not the greatest news, but often with a new day, you can actually make a plan and fix it. There's nothing worse than getting bad news at the end, trying to deal with that then.
Yeah, it's definitely good to get some firm things that you can put in place. And tools like Calendly are really great at that because it means that booking meetings is really easy and you can set boundaries for when you will take those meetings.
I'd like to give a plug to VXT, who has also been good for creating boundaries. A software provider who can help create a landline for you, and I particularly enjoyed this. So if someone calls me, I miss the call, and I tell them to leave me a voicemail, it will then transcribe it as text and send it to me as an email. Means that I can see it pop up and check, is it urgent? And it's been really useful for me as well to have some boundaries there because otherwise it's difficult when you're getting called all the time.
So you mentioned before you used a mentor loop. Could you explain what that is for people that might be in a similar position?
Yeah, I think mentor loop doesn't really work that well in New Zealand. I think that the concept is good, but the execution isn't great. So I've been a mentor and a mentee on there, but there just isn't enough engagement on there and it doesn't really flow that well. So I was lucky that that I slid into the right person's DMs. I've also had the opportunity to be a mentor where a young guy reached out to me and said, hey, I can't get a grad job. What do I do? And so I could relate to that story and told him about me coming back from exchange. And my wife and I helped him tidy up his cover letter and his CV and then apply for a job. And he now thinks that I can walk on water because he got his first job after that. So that was a pretty cool experience to give back like that. But I think mentor loop, the idea is great, but the execution, it's just not there in New Zealand.
And so, for some people that might not be familiar with having a mentor, what does it look like? So, how often do you meet with your mentors, perhaps the ones that are more entrepreneurial based or legal based, and what do you discuss?
Yeah, so there's no set agenda for me actually like catching up with them. I think I have previously been of a part of a program where you do get assigned a mentor. in this program, my mentor actually broke up with me. She said, I think we should see other people, because whilst this was going on, originally it started as how can I help with a few things at my previous job and make an impact there. But during this time, I started asking her more entrepreneurial questions about, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And she basically said, hey, I think we should see other people. I'm not the right mentor for you, and broke up with me. Which, no,
Heartbreaking.
at the time I was hurt, but I can see that it was for the best. But if you do end up in a mentor relationship, then it needs to be mentee driven. So if you end up being lucky enough to be a mentee, you need to drive it. So it's like, what do you actually want to achieve? How are you going to do that? How are you going to communicate with me? It all has to be mentee driven. And the best advice I could give for anyone else who wants a mentor or wants to meet someone, easiest way is to be polite, is you send them an email saying, hello, this is who I am. Tell them your story, but keep it sharp. And then say, I would really like to meet with you near your office or at your office. Suggest going to them, always go to them, and then ask for some availability in their calendar. Make it as easy as possible for them to say yes to you. The key thing is, it's like the number one rule, don't ask someone to be your mentor, right? You have to trick them into doing it. This is how I would do it again. You have to trick them into doing it. So once you tell them your story, see if they like you, then you just have to go to them with interesting questions. And for instance, now when I ask for a mentor advice, I set out the background, I set out the facts, and then I'll tell them what my view is and the two options I'm thinking of, or three, or whatever it is. And I make it as easy as possible for them to say yes or no, or choose a view. I then finish the email by saying, by the way, I'm going to call you at 4 p.m. If you don't pick up, I'll try you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Right? And so that means that they know when I'm going to call. They don't have to respond. I just have to deliver, call up. If they miss it, I try them again. More often than not, they'll just get back to me, or I'll try them at the second time. Keys there. Don't ask someone to be your mentor. Slowly trick them over time and have an interesting story. That will make all the difference.
That's really interesting. It's a good reflection on what to do and what not to do when trying to find a mentor. And thinking back to starting your own practice, is there anything that you would have done differently?
That's a good question. Despite doing this in some of the most unpredictable property times in the NZ, I don't think I'd change a thing. I basically had to struggle to learn what I needed to do. And it's the cliche of, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Because I've gone from zero, had to climb the proverbial mountain, that makes the journey a lot more rewarding and exciting. So yeah, I don't think I'd change a thing. It's helped me grow personally and professionally, and yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
That's awesome to hear. And other than it being quite a hard time to start a first home buyer law firm, how have you coped with other obstacles that have come up? Have there been other obstacles that you didn't expect?
Like having children, or
That would be one.
no, I've been lucky enough to have kids during this time as well. It just creates an extra level of communication and discipline to like your career. I think a key one is just definitely knowing like when to refer work on. Like at the start, you're just hungry for any work, right? But you also have to be very careful about, am I taking on a difficult matter? Like I'm a big believer in focusing on the 80% and referring away the 20. So if it doesn't fit within my ideal target client, I guess I'm lucky now I can actually refer away this work. But at the start, if someone comes to you with a tricky situation, hey, I want to buy with my aunt, my mum, my aunt, my cousin, and my stepsister. We're going to be putting in different amounts of money. We're going to have a guarantee here, borrowing some more money here. That one's pretty much straight away a red flag for me, those types of situations. So it's definitely just knowing how to stay within the bounds of what you know and passing on the work that doesn't fit with your ideal target client.
Yeah, it's definitely good to know where to draw the line, because I think at the end of the day, it will probably end up being just as efficient for you by turning them away, because you'd have more time to spend on all of your other clients.
Yes.
What has been the biggest difference between working for someone else and working for yourself?
That's a good question. I think all of us probably got a little bit used to that during lockdown. If you just have to be accountable to yourself to be at your desk on time, it's not like your work wants to be Big Brother checking in on you. Hey, you weren't online on Skype for 15 minutes. It's a bit, yeah, when you're at university, are you better at studying at home or at the library? I could never study at home, so I'd always go to the library. So for me, it's just about setting up an area, which is your office, and being very disciplined with your hours and also allocating time to what you're actually going to do. You have a never ending to do list, and so it's easy to feel guilty about that you haven't done enough. But I think that if you can actually sit down, eat the frog each morning, do your one key task, allocate time in for your family and also in for client meetings and have some flexibility, then the rest of the week actually just flows quite easily.
So, to wrap up this episode, I have quickfire questions that I'm going to ask you, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind, either a sentence or a word.
Sure.
If you could recommend a book to somebody, what would you recommend them?
If you want to get into business, I really recommend reading a book called Built to Sell. This book is written by an American guy, and it just talks about if you want to set up your business to sell it, how you actually do that. But it was really useful for me to think about, what does 10 years look like? How am I going to structure this? Who am I going to hire? So that's part of my longer term plan, just about setting things up correctly.
Great. I love getting good book recommendations. I once heard that if someone you want advice from doesn't have a lot of time, you should ask them for a book recommendation because you can learn a lot of what they may practice in their day-to-day life by asking this. If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you have dinner with
Dead or alive, who could I have dinner with?
and why?
Let's go with Tyson Fury, the Gypsy King. I think he would be an entertaining night out. Somewhat controversial figure, but I think it would be a rip-roaring dinner.
Yeah, I think that would be funny based off of his new Netflix show. Seems like chaos. Last question is, what is next for Angus Grayson?
What's next? Currently, probably halfway through my quarter-life crisis, which seems to suit me. I think at the moment I'm in what I'd like to call the middle of the deal storm. If you want to buy property before Christmas, you probably have, I'm just checking the date now, 5 working days to get an unconditional agreement. I'm looking forward to having the designated mandated break for all law firms from December through to about mid-January. And then I'm just going to keep repeat doing what I've been doing well. It's just doubling down on what has been going well. And so that's focusing on first home buyer, keeping the mortgage broker happy, and delivering on time.
Thanks so much, Angus, for your time today. I'm sure that our listeners will be able to take away some really practical pieces of advice from this episode, or perhaps even the courage to start their own practice.
Yeah, and if you are listening and you're at the beginning of your legal career, want to figure out how to take the next step, please slide into my DMs. They are open, and I know what it's like to feel like you're at the beginning as a grad or wanting to create your own startup. I've always got time available for you to chat, and I'd love to help you.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of File Notes. To keep up with the latest episodes and content, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at File Notes Podcast. You can also visit us on our website at vxt.co.nz/podcast/file notes to subscribe to our email list and never miss an episode. That's vxt.co.nz/podcasts/file notes. See you there.